han estado haciendo un montón de esfuerzos para que la mayoría de nuestros alumnos pueda acceder al inglés. Sin embargo, esta es la realidad actual. No sé, no funciona. Y les voy a mostrar, ahí está, les voy a mostrar esa gráfica. Esa gráfica es la de los resultados del año pasado en cuanto a mejora en la enseñanza de inglés en América Latina. Miren, Uruguay y México estamos muy cerquita. Nosotros mejoramos un poquito y ustedes empeoraron un poquito. Y hay un profesor, él nació en el Reino Unido, pero vivió toda su vida aquí en México, a quien yo sigo mucho, que es Paul Davis. No sé si lo conocen o lo han leído. Paul, el año pasado, en un journal que se llama Language 2, hace esta observación. And I'm not going to read it. You can read it yourselves. And from now on, I'm going to move on to English altogether so that we can be on the same time. 2021, sorry, not 2022. And it's what he says is true. Not all of our students will need English. Do you agree with that? Yes? Well, I don't. Because we live in a world that is no longer bilingual, it's multilingual. So the least that all our citizens should have is bilingualism. And what I'm going to invite you to do is to think about what we do and how we can do it differently. No longer are we going to look at what the experts from the UK, the United States, and Canada tell us, because they haven't taught in our schools. We are the experts, and we are doing a lot of wonderful things that, because we are non-native speakers or we don't belong to the big universities, does not get shared. I think this is the moment when Latin America can come together and do something together. Okay, the best time to give a talk. And then it doesn't work and he's not looking at me. Hey. Hello. I'm going to ask you to think for a minute, if you can think with all this noise, think about whether these things are true or false. And then at the end of the talk, we're going to go back. Okay? Have you decided true or false? Good. Many times when we are told that we are going to do a reform or a transformation, our reaction is this. What? Why? And they tell us, now we are going to teach through projects, for example. And I go like, what? I've been doing projects since the 1980s. What's new about that? What happens in our profession is that a lot of things have become literalized. What does it mean? That our common sense assumptions have become nonsense. And we need to fight that, because our common sense assumptions are not ours. They are borrowed from other realities. They have become some sort of mantras, right? Like, for example, is this a mantra that you use? I have to lower the affective filters so that they can learn. Do you use that mantra? Students need exposure to comprehensible input. Is that a mantra that you use? And I'm going to give you this one. Grammar is bad. I shouldn't teach grammar. Is that a mantra? So let's start by looking at some constructs. What do we call acquisition? To many people, acquisition is not learning, right? I'm going to prove them wrong. We're also going to look at communication, which is what we teach. We don't teach a language. We don't teach an object. We teach people to communicate. What is acquisition? Acquisition is something that we can define given our teacher training. How would you define acquisition? Any ideas? If you can shout loud enough. In general, we say acquisition is an unconscious process. We pick up the language. Well, first thing is, if it is an unconscious process, it doesn't happen. If you are not conscious, you cannot learn. It's as simple as that, right? Second thing, acquisition is not different from learning. Both learning and acquisition are two sides of the same coin. It depends on how you flip the coin and where it lands based on your students' needs. In 2022, two teachers of Spanish in Michigan State University wrote a wonderful little book which is called Second Language Acquisition Goes to the Classroom, right? And they define acquisition as the mostly, look at this, mostly implicit process of building a linguistic system. A linguistic system has meaning, has syntax, has pragmatics, has discourse. And how do we build this system? By making form-meaning connections from the input that we receive. Hello? So they say acquisition is what happens to you while you are busy understanding messages. Isn't that a wonderful definition? I just love it because it's so simple, deceptively simple. But then when we look at what happens in the classroom, many times students are not trying to understand and convey messages. They are doing something else. And the most important thing is everybody acquires in a different way. So we cannot consciously control this process. What the course books say that, okay, I teach A1 this course, A2 next course. No, these are individual processes that cannot be so neatly put into boxes and controlled. The two of the most influential thinkers in second language acquisition are Nina Spada and Patsy Lightbound. In 2008, in the famous book that they write that language acquisition is not an event. It's not something that happens one day, right? That occurs as a result of exposure to language form, a language lesson or corrective feedback. Language acquisition is much more than that. It's all about communication. Again, I may ask you, what is communication? Communication, look at this, Van Patten in 2017, is the expression, interpretation, and negotiation of meaning with a purpose in a given context. Three things that I want to highlight about this, again, very simple definition. It's about expressing, interpreting, and negotiating, right? So if I want to communicate, I need to be able to do three. If I cannot negotiate, if I cannot interpret, if I cannot express, there's no communication. Secondly, I communicate because of a reason. There's a purpose in my communication. And the third important thing is that that communication happens in a given context where each of us plays a role where there is a difference. Maybe there is like a professional difference between us, the teacher and the student, the principal and the teacher, and we need to adjust our communication accordingly. So, I hate it when I go to see classes and the teacher says, imagine that you are a famous rock star. Imagine you are, I don't know, the president of a country. Our students in public schools, they don't want to pretend to be anybody else. If English is a subject in the curriculum, to them it's one more subject that they may like or not. So why force them to be somebody else when they are very fragile in terms of who they are themselves? What is a good English course? Some course where the teacher organizes communication around what the students are at that time in history, right? They are students, they are not tourists. What do they like to talk about when they are speaking in Spanish with their friends? What they're going to do on Saturday, the sports that they like, the music that they listen. That is what we have to look at. But for that, we need to know our students. So if we ignore that context, we are not doing communication. We are just doing language practice. If the context, which is what brings the students together with language, is not taken care of, no communication. So what is the purpose of communication? I go back to those two Spanish teachers. Our purpose of communication is to learn about each other or the world around us. So it's not just to acquire a language esoterically or learn the grammatical rules. It's being able to do things. And I'm going to show you how you can do it. Oh my God. The last thing is, of course, is self-evident. Communication is what determines what linguistic resources. Now look at this. Communication cannot be equated with first learning some vocabulary, then learning some grammar, and then finding something to talk about to use the grammar and the vocabulary. Now, you look at most of the textbooks, and that is how the textbooks are organized. Every unit has lesson 1, vocabulary, lesson 2, grammar, lesson 3, grammar practice, then oral activities, reading activities, listening activities, writing activities, and some sort of clean or project. Communication, as we said, is the purposeful, there is a purpose, interpretation or expression of meaning. The idea is we have to look at what we are doing and we are asking the students to do and think about two questions. Every activity you give your students, run them through these two questions. What information or content is being conveyed? Is there information or content being conveyed? And secondly, will the students do something with that? And I don't mean just receive it, do something. And I'm going to show you how you can do these things. Move it. Oh, sorry, no, there, wait a minute, wait. Let me introduce you to my granddaughter to show you what communicative competence is like. Meet India. She's now 7, but this happened when she was barely a year and a half. Thank you very much. You can blame the mother for calling her India and also for the fringe. The mother and I don't agree. But this was a situation. I mean, my son, who's the father, turned 35 yesterday. And he's one of these modern parents, right? No sugar, no gender bias, nothing pink, right? No mass-produced things. Everything has to be homemade, organic. But of course, when one is a grandparent, the greatest delight is to do what the father says not to do, right? So this was a dialogue that happened when my granddaughter came to my house. She was staying with me and my wife. And then the father came to pick her up. And we were about to have tea. And so this is a conversation. She looks at the father, not at me. She had been spending the afternoon with me. And there were some cookies on the table. And she goes, "Daddy, gimme." What did the father say? "Give me cookie." India, cookie. 1 year and a half, right? This cookie. And the father was all saying no. So it was too much for me to see the poor thing suffering. So I picked up a cookie and she went like, "This cookie?" "Pop-up cookie, no." She thought I was going to eat the cookie. "Pop-up cookie, no." Right? She could only speak in 2 words. Can we say she's communicatively competent? Absolutely. What do we give students instead of this? We don't tolerate their emergent language. We talk about agent and action and object and possession. It makes no sense. What we are looking at here, we need to look at is meaning. I'm going to show you a little experiment that my students and I did with their own students. This was a class of adults who have returned to official education because they only completed primary. They wanted to do secondary. And they have English as a subject. We use a task-based approach, where first the students communicate with the resources that they have, then we take that language and we make it systematic. We show them how things are done, and then we give them a similar task to do. The question here was, because these are all adults, we have people who are 60, 70 years old, right? How did you used to communicate with your parents? And this is a recording of a woman. She was 67, and this is what she said. "Very good now, but that time, long time ago, if you wanted to speak with parent, you use letter. 2-3 months they waiting." Did she communicate meaning? Was her English perfect? But was it intelligible? Then we picked up parts of the conversation and we did a grammar lesson with practice and all those things. And we said, we are going to do the same task, but you're going to talk to a different person. Instead of doing a different task with the same person, we are doing the same task, but with a different person. And this is the later turn. She starts like 20 years ago, the communication was very bad, because if you wanted to talk and to contact your parent, they're living in another country. You have to write a letter and post, and they didn't get 2 months. Do you see the improvements? Can we say that she has acquired more language? And she acquired it because we taught it to her expressly. In 1996, the new definition of communicative competence was created, which I think is more similar to what we need to do. We say, instead of talking about linguistic competence, social-linguistic competence, discourse competence, we talk about organizational competence, that is grammar and all the forms in which we can organize our language, and also textual competence. We communicate in texts, written or oral, or even pictorial or digital. But we do so through text. What is a text? Any stretch of language that holds together through meaning. So the stop sign outside the expo is a text. But if I take one page from the Bible, one page, that is not a text. That is a passage only, because the full text is the Bible. Do you understand? Then we need, this is the theory, let's say. How do we organize text? But then we need the practical. How to express our ideas. There we have elocutionary competence. And remember we said we always communicate in a context. So I need to use the correct language, right? For that particular purpose. This definition by Bachman and Palmer is not very well known, but to me is more realistic than anything else we have done. Unfortunately, when in 1979, Krashen created his Mania are the five hypotheses, he changed the field of English language teaching up to today. What is the mania? This is a mnemonic for the five hypotheses. And remember that these are hypotheses. The monitor hypothesis, affective filter hypothesis, natural order hypothesis, input hypothesis, and acquisition learning hypothesis. Guess what? Since 1979 up to now, how many of these hypotheses have been proven correct? Give me a number with your fingers, show me. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? How many do you think? 0? Let's see. Only one. We all come pre-programmed to learning languages. And if you look at how people learn languages across languages, we go through approximately the same process. So the natural order hypothesis is what should structure our courses, what people will naturally be able to do, and not the grammar or the linguistic syllabus that is forced upon us. We talk about language as a system of systems. Let me show you this. Would you say this? Well, you could say, yes, right. Right? Not very sophisticated pronunciation. Let's put it in a little bit of a context, right? A says she made a tremendous effort. Yes, right. What am I doing there? I am agreeing. But look at this. If I say she made a tremendous effort, yeah, right. Okay, what am I doing? I agreed, but I'm changing topic. Let's look at another context. Look at the expression. She would say like this, she made a tremendous effort. Yeah, right. What is that? Pure irony, right? So this is what our students want to do. And guess what? Many students are learning languages through participating in social media, and they pick up these things, but they don't find them in the classroom. And that is why sometimes I switch off. So, let's skip this. We now talk about instructed second language acquisition. We can teach our students how to use language correctly if we are focusing on meaning and communication first. And these are all the principles. One more so they have the reference. That was Ellis in 2016. He wrote this simple 10 points of instructed second language acquisition. But how do we do it in the classroom, you may be thinking? This is a typical activity that appears in textbooks. Activity 1, it has an example. Do you wash the dishes every day? Yes, I wash them every day. Your turn. Now, talk to a partner. Ask and answer the questions. Do you sweep the floor every day? Yes, I sweep it every day. How motivating. Do you want to do this again? Let's look at the 2 questions. Is any information being conveyed here? Real information? No. We're just reading questions and answering, but there's no real information. And are the students doing something meaningful with the language? No. But I can change this with one magic touch. And it doesn't require that I do a lot of planning or anything. I just try to get the 2 questions to be yes. Is there information or content conveyed? Real? Yes. Do students do something with it? Yes. This is how I rewrote the activity. Individually, indicate on a scale from 1 to 5 how much you like or dislike these chores. The scale is number 1, please don't make me do it. And number 5, yes, I'll do that, right? And then, pardon me, I give them a full list of chores. No, back. And then, after they've done it individually, true to themselves, they compare their answers with a partner, right? But the key here is the 2 of them have to summarize the information. And then, after they summarize the information, they have to discuss whether they would be good roommates, why or why not. And we had, when we did this in the classroom, 2 results for this. People who chose a roommate based on what they didn't like, but the other one liked, right? Or people who chose a roommate who had the same obsessive compulsive disorders as themselves, right? Now, yes. What is the difference in activity 2? Now, yes. It is two-way communication. There is an information gap. There is something that one student knows that the other one doesn't. Continue. You see, this is more aligned with the theory we have been discussing. But the important thing is students are doing something with the language. It's not just that they are repeating things, right? And what you are going to notice is that language is going to emerge from the interaction. And that language is going to be bad. It's going to be full of errors. It's going to be even meaningless at times. What is your job as a teacher to do? Pick up that language and teach the students how to say it correctly, but based on their own motivations. So this, we can say, is truly, truly communicative. Yes. The next one. From linguistic theory, we know, right, that the construction of linguistic knowledge in dialogue is language learning in progress. And also that, unlike the claim that comprehensible input leads to learning, it's not comprehensible input that leads to learning, right? It's the communication, is the performance that leads to learning, right? Let me give you an example. This is supposed to be a joke in English. So English people would laugh at it. Would you laugh at it? Would you laugh at it? Is that a joke to you? So if I were to teach this many times, I have this in the book, for example, and I have an activity, a car accident. Try to fill in the blanks. Can you fill in the blanks? Well, let me show you the real text, and let's see if when you read the real text, the joke makes sense. I told you the front end of the car was too long. Does the joke make sense now? Yeah? Well, the same thing happens when you do a communicative activity with your students. You get the language that they give you, which is the language at their disposal. You teach them, and then this aha moment, there's the joke, that is when they do the task again. And we know that learners do not come to us as an empty slate. They have a lot of contributions to make to the process. The first thing, they have attributes. And these have been researched. You know, there's always a tendency to think that children learn faster than adults. You know, that is a lie. Adults learn faster than children. There is another myth that age does not allow you to develop good pronunciation. That is a myth. If you are not taught pronunciation. They have the famous myth of, ay, profe, yo no nací para el inglés. I don't have the aptitude. Lies. Anybody can learn a language. Anybody, no matter what special educational need they have, they can learn, and they do learn. Of course, if given the right conditions, right? They have to be given the right conditions. Personality. We think that people are extroverted and they communicate more, or if they are introverted, they tend to be shy and silent. Did you know that your personality can change, that you can be somebody in English and somebody else in Spanish, or your mother tongue? So personality really does not make a difference. But yes, the level of anxiety that I bring, and has nothing to do with the affective filter, because every time I teach, I need to develop a minimum level of anxiety, which is what keeps people motivated, right? Not something that is so difficult that they cannot do it, but yes, something that puts them in, I have to think, I have to interact. And then in terms of gender, there is no difference. Men, women, males, females, we all learn in the same ways. Not that the brain is different from a woman to a man. But they also have attitudes. And here, they can help you or they can hinder your teaching. Motivation. If students are not motivated, they are not going to learn because they are not going to invest. Now, can you motivate your students? Can you motivate your students? No. No. Motivation is an internal state. What you can do is create the conditions for students to motivate themselves. How? Well, making sure that you bring the students' interests into your teaching. And I don't think, I'm not saying, let's talk about football players and let's talk about reggaeton or whatever music they are listening, or trap or whatever. It's listen to your students. What are they interested in? Are they interested in human rights? Are they interested in, the new generations are incredibly more aware than we are about world conflicts and world issues. Use that. Now, there are beliefs, and beliefs come to you from the cradle, from the moment you were born. And beliefs are given to you by your families. And guess what? People don't change their beliefs. We can change our attitude or how we exteriorize our beliefs. And if a student has been told, mija, no te preocupes con inglés porque sos igual a tu madre o a tu padre. Nunca aprendieron, así que no te gastes. No pongas ningún esfuerzo. If that belief comes from home, there's very little you can do. Now, this way of teaching, where you get the students to communicate, then you teach them how to communicate, and then they can say something new, that shows them that nobody is limited. And we all have our own learning preferences. We have to respect that there are some students who do not like working in groups. They hate working in groups because they have social anxiety, because of religious reasons, right? Because of beliefs. So we have to find creative ways for them to do what we want the rest of the class to do, but in their own context. And then, of course, there are the actions that they bring, which are learning strategies. Now, we teachers are faced with the famous communicative approach, which is supposed to be an umbrella term for teaching through communication. That means a lot of approaches. The presentation, practice, production approach is communicative. Task-based learning is communicative. Language and content integration is communicative. Content and language integrated learning is communicative. Lexical approach is communicative. Dogma is communicative. So what do I do? Demand high is communicative. What do? I think it's time that we close the umbrella, right? And stop talking about the communicative approach as an umbrella term and talk about how we best teach our learners. Not the method, not the book, not the content. But I was going to say something about culture, but I have 5 minutes. So it's a pity if I had the clicker. Let's go to the next one. Whenever we are hired to teach, we are hired under the premise that we have something called methodological competence, right? So we know methods to guide teaching. But we know that methods in themselves have limited us. An updated view of teachers' methodological competence is this informed pragmatism. We look at what works with this group. And maybe next year I have the same group in a different grade, and what I did last year doesn't work anymore. And I don't have to feel confused because of that. But we know that teaching is very scary business. It is scary, people, because we're tinkering with students' minds and lives. We have to deal with theories. We have to deal with, am I teaching children, teenagers, adults? I need to change my approach. Their beliefs, how do I countervene their beliefs? The materials I am supposed to teach, in some cases I have to teach from cover to cover. In other cases, do what you want. What do I do with the students' language 1 in the classroom? Because they use it all the time. What about the social context? Do I teach in a school with a low socioeconomic context or a school with privileged context? See, what does the school demand from me in terms of administrative work? How about my family? When do I see my family? Do I have time? So there are many methods that I have to understand. And of course, there are my colleagues. Some of them are from heaven, some others are from hell. And I have to survive all this because you know what? On the calendar, of course, and rules and regulations, and grading. It's life, you guys. It's the life that we chose. If it were in another way, perhaps we wouldn't be doing it. So again, now I'm asking you to think, at the beginning we discussed these, true or false, what do you think now? Okay? Have any of your views changed, at least a little bit? Have I been able to make you a little bit curious about some new things? Yes? Well, I'm glad, because that was the purpose. I want to conclude with a quote from Byram. Byram studies intercultural communicative competence, and he says, language teaching is seen as preparation, and all the more so since it has shifted from the teaching of language and the study of language as a system to this facilitating of learning to communicate and the notion of communicative language teaching. Languages, in this view, are learned for later. When you go to X country or when you meet an X speaking person, right? So, in general, our students don't want this. We need to do away with this notion, because they have no sense. They make no sense of, one day you're going to speak in English. What they want, what they need is language for today, and that is what we should provide. And I want to stress it. Language for today, so that they can talk to their peers about themselves, right? Take a photo of this. This is the bibliography that I have used to inform this presentation. I hope that you have gotten at least one new idea to do in your classroom, at least one question that you want an answer for, and at least one confirmation of your talent in teaching. Those were my 3 goals. Recognize your talent, learn about something new, and get one more idea. And what I say is thank you very much.
Vamos a abrir el foro para un par de minutos para preguntas que tengan para el doctor Gabriel Díaz Maggioli. Por favor, les pido el otro micrófono, que esté atento. ¿Alguien tiene una pregunta? Por favor, levante su mano. Allá atrás, por favor.
Hi. My question is, how would you increase the motivation in your students? I know that you can't have motivated students, but how would you create an environment that will be good for them to be motivated so they can learn better?
One of the things that we have been toying or experimenting with is how to set up the lesson, not from a linguistic point of view, but from a learning point of view. And we have found that doing these things help the students learn. First, we communicate what we're going to do that day. Today and we do it in communication terms. Today we're going to learn how to make a suggestion, or today we're going to learn how to describe your clothes. And then you ask the students, but I'm sure you know how to do this already. Let's see, is there any word, any expression? So from the very first minute, you are engaging them in saying, oh, I know this, I can do this, right? Then we carefully sequence the lesson so that there is an activation of the students' background knowledge, that they do something with that background knowledge individually, and then they do a short communicative activity with their peers, like the one of the chores, right? And then we discuss the results, and from those results, we build a grammar explanation, a vocabulary lesson. We give them a text that is connected to that. where they can get more input. And immediately after we have explained and practiced, we do a lot of practice, traditional practice, from drills to fill in the blanks to matching, because they need to manipulate the language. Then we give them a communicative situation again. And all of that in 1 or 2 lessons. But at the end of the lesson, we go back to the beginning and we ask them to self-assess again. And that self-assessment gives them, first of all, takeaways from the lesson, so they know what they have learned. And secondly, they can say, no aprendí esto. Entonces le puedo preguntar al profe, o le puedo preguntar a un compañero. Because motivating the students is not the difficult thing. The difficult thing is sustaining that motivation, right? Throughout the lesson and throughout the course. And the only way you can sustain motivation is if students are successful, right? Remember the old saying, nothing succeeds like success. Thank you for your question.
Maybe we have time for one more question. Anybody else? Anybody else? Yes.
I wasn't here for the early session, so I was just at the summarizing part. But as a future teacher for English as a second language, what tips or advice would you give me or anybody here present? Because I'm still like 19, so there's a lot of work ahead for me to do, but I'm excited. I'm just listening to your presentation is, I don't know, joyful. I mean, it gives me inspiration to continue on this career, and I just want to hear advice from you.
First thing is, open the door to your classroom, talk to your colleagues, talk to your students, find out how you can teach better by interacting with others. If you create a new activity, a material or whatever, don't keep it to yourself, share it. And at the beginning, you're going to find resistance because you are young. And what is this young kid going to teach me, right? And then always think about communication. Are my students sharing information or content? Are they doing something with it? Are they reading about it? Are they talking about it? Keep those two and continue learning. I mean, once you become a teacher, you never stop learning. So take any course, any seminar, and implement things in your classroom, but always ask your students, did this work for you guys? Did you learn more? Always be humble enough to involve the students because they are the reason that we are who we are.
Muchas gracias. Por favor, un fuerte aplauso para el doctor Gabriel Díaz Maggioli. Y por favor, en nombre de la Secretaría de Educación y del 5º Congreso Recrea, les tendemos un reconocimiento como conferencista. Muchas gracias.